Good evening. I'm calling to order a workshop, partial open agenda, partial closed agenda of the Stevens Point Area School Board on Monday, May 19th at 6:30 p.m. Roll call and verification of a quorum, please.
Ms. Baker?
Here.
Jackson?
Here.
Mr. Kokonowski?
Here.
Mr. Presley?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Ms. Scheibele?
Here.
Ms. Derrick?
Here.
Cotton?
Here.
Have a quorum.
We need to approve the agenda, and I need a motion to do so.
Move for approval?
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Yes, I would like to move the whole section 5 to when we can have an open meeting with public comment. If we can postpone that to the next meeting. If the next meetings aren't until June 9th and 23rd, there should be no urgency to do that now without public input.
Anyone else have comments on that?
That's basically the same thing I was going to say. Are you making a motion, Taunton?
Any other discussion on that? So it's moving number 5 to the next regular board meeting in order to have public input. Yes.
Sorry, these are intimidating. Why is that important to move those to another meeting? I'm just looking at the content, at what they are, and
Because whether anyone speaks or not, I feel strongly that the public should have an opportunity to speak. I don't know if they would or not, but that's not the point for me. For me, it's
in your motion is just number 5.
correct.
Any other comments? Thoughts? Yes, Chris?
I'd like the motion read. I don't know if Jeff heard the motion and I'd like to make a comment. I understand moving it would possibly give an opportunity, but I believe this is our responsibility, and this is the board's decision to decide the board meetings, the committee meetings, and that. We've already moved it once, and I think it's the appropriate thing to, since it's put on this agenda, that we should do that. I've done some work, and that I would really let me know for scheduling purposes, especially things can be changed. But we all have things coming up, and that I'd like to know when our meetings are, and I think this is our responsibility to set these up.
Any other discussion? Yep, Lisa?
Then would it be all right to leave A, B, and C there and move D? If setting the dates is important to you to do that now? I'm saying leave 5A, B, and C here to accommodate the desires of Ms. Scott and move 5D to the next meeting.
5D to the next meeting? I think 5D would be fine. I'm the one
That's what I said.
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear. I'm getting an echo. 5D is what I requested, so I have no problem with that.
Or Lisa can just amend it herself, right?
Mhm.
Yep. So Lisa, you can amend it to reflect that.
5A, B, 5D rather, to the next meeting, next school board meeting.
Further oh, sorry, Kim, you need to re-second it.
Second.
Jeff? You can't hear? Okay, you know what? We need to talk into the microphone. Sorry, it's a little echoey, but it's the only way we can hear each other right now. Yes, Jeff?
There is a motion on the floor.
There is a motion to remove 5D until the next regular board meeting, which will be June 9th. June 9th. Move it till just 5D until June 9th. Is anyone against what? Okay, is there anyone who is opposed to the motion? Okay. Then it carries due to unanimous consent. We have our Robert's Rules guru sitting next to me. Okay, so now we need to approve the agenda. Or is that what we just did? Or did we just?
Approves with the
Okay, so we need a motion and a second to approve with amendments, please. Okay. Second, okay. Any discussion? Yep, Kim?
I just want to make a note that the June 2nd workshop is not listed on here, that I believe we set it up, so I don't know if we want to add that, or just at least make sure that people know that the June 2nd, there's going to be, I believe we call it a listening section.
It'll be held at Ben Franklin in the auditorium to accommodate whatever the size group is we want. 2 comments on that, because I've had a couple questions. First of all, this is being live streamed right now, so people are able to watch it from home. Second comment is it's also being recorded, and it will be available for people to watch. So if you have people you think want to see portions of it or all of it, they can watch it online. Dan, starting when? Okay, so somewhere around tomorrow afternoon. And so the open, it'll be basically a listening session. The board will be present, and people can make their comments on June 2nd at Ben Franklin in the auditorium. Okay. Trish?
My only question, and maybe you just answered this, we'll move 5D to June 2nd then?
No, June 9th.
The June 9th. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, roll call vote, please. This is to approve the agenda minus 5D.
Mr. Ebo?
Yes.
Ms. Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Kokanowski? Yes. Mr. Presley?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Shibley?
Yes.
Ms. Sherrick?
Yes.
Otten? Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Carries 9-0.
Okay, we're on to the workshop presentation, and just for the courtesy of the audience, I'll explain to you what we're going to do. We're just seated up here to open the meeting, and then we'll come back here after the presentation. Right now, the members of the board are just going to go sit in the audience and watch it just with the rest of you. We'll come back up here if we're going to have a discussion about it, and there's no action. So we'll have a conversation. We're then going to go into closed session, or vote to go into closed session. If it passes, we'll go into closed session and come back. If there's any action to be taken from our closed session meeting, we'll come right back to these seats and do that. So here, there, here, there, here. Just so everybody understands what we're doing. Okay? Could board members please push their microphones down, like that, which I'll do in a second. Otherwise, I'm going to introduce Charlie Carlson from Carlson Detman. He is going to come and give our final presentation on compensation. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Thanks for coming out on a wet March night. It's spring in Wisconsin. We have a presentation to go through with you tonight, and as I understand it, this PowerPoint will be posted on your intranet tomorrow. We've issued a written report with an executive summary and statement of findings and recommendations, and in this PowerPoint, I'll go through most of the major points covered in that report, but the report is in greater detail, and so I would encourage you to get a copy and read it, and then be prepared with any questions you might have, either at a listening session or subsequently. This project covers 3 compensation plans, one for support staff, one for teachers and related positions, and the third for administrators. And the question is, where do we go from here? We made some observations in December regarding the pay plan for the groups. Fundamentally, we concluded that for the teacher group and for others as well, that the pay plan is market competitive. Current compensation levels were reasonably competitive with the market, but the pay plan structure itself was either non-existent or broken and needed to be improved. We felt that there were issues involving internal equity, and so we have made a number of recommendations in this report of things that we think the district should consider moving forward, and I'm going to review those with you tonight. Well, how did we get here? It's been a tortuous path, I would suggest. I've been doing what I do in Wisconsin before interest arbitration was adopted, and have been through labor relations and compensation management in Wisconsin for over 40 years. Teacher pay plans are sort of unique in how we structure compensation in the American economy. Essentially, historically, they're what I would call a skill-based plan, and the notion that teachers would move up through the pay system based upon length of service and increased levels of education. And since, I'd say, the last 10 years or so, there has been a great deal of discussion about how do we introduce concepts of performance into pay determination. Essentially, in my experience in K-12 school districts, the compensation system was driven fundamentally by teacher collective bargaining and the existence of this type of system. In fact, leadership pay tended to be linked to teacher compensation because quite often administrators were promoted from the teaching ranks into positions of leadership in the district, and non-exempt staff compensation was essentially linked based upon to benefits. By the way interest arbitration statutes were written, there was little consideration given to what was going on in local labor markets. And in the case of the pay plan involving your non-exempt staff, support staff, very large group, over 400 employees, there really wasn't a pay plan. Each classification has a single rate. So people didn't have an opportunity to earn more based upon length of service or performance, etc. You'd have to get promoted into a different job. So there really has been no link between pay and performance for all practical purposes within the district, and that's not uncommon in a lot of public entities. All of that, of course, is changing fairly extensively at different paces in different places. And you've had a relatively expensive health insurance program that needs to be examined. And as you know, you've had a retiree health insurance commitment that was made outside of the old QEO and bargaining that typically is not funded in school districts that you're now faced with paying for. So it's been quite a legacy of tradition and history that got stood on its head a couple of years ago when Acts 10 and 32 were adopted by the Wisconsin legislature. It abolished interest arbitration, extremely restricted the scope of bargaining, altered the political environment through union certification and dues provisions. In addition, we had all kinds of economic realities that we're still coming to grips with around the state, starting to pull out of it, but in some regions faster than others. So the bottom line is, and you tried to have referenda passed, et cetera, and the voters did not accept those. So you've been feeling financial pressure, and the district needed to respond and did so by a lot of cost cutting. Approximately 60 teaching and administrative positions were eliminated. Educational assistant hours were cut in half. And across the state, pay plans were abolished or frozen. Employees started paying half their contribution to Wisconsin retirement. Retiree health plans were reduced. Employee health insurance contributions increased and eliminated paid long-term insurance for retirees. So this is a situation we entered into a year or so ago when we were asked to help you unlock your pay plans and try to move them forward and get you back on a path of progress. These types of events happened in a lot of different districts across the state. It just wasn't here. So you need to have that in context, but the solutions that we develop for you and that the board is being asked to consider, we're suggesting you consider, have to be particular to this community and your opportunities and your limitations. One of the biggest limitations that you're operating under is that you're having to fund a teacher retiree health premium program that's costing you about $2.5 million a year, which is about 10% of the teaching payroll. So about 10% of the payroll is going out the door on an annual basis, has absolutely nothing to do with the education of today's kids or your compensation. That's a burden. And a lot of districts have saddled up and are faced with that burden as well. You're not alone. But it is a reality that you have to live with in thinking about what do we do in the future. And I think the cautionary tale there is that whatever ultimately you decide to do in terms of compensation is that it's always done with a sound fiscal note and a determination of whether what you're deciding to do is sustainable. Having done what I do for over 40 years in Wisconsin, I have watched any number of elected bodies make decisions that were of immediate salvation and a long-term problem. And I think, I'm hoping what we have learned through this exercise is that that is not good public policy. I was asked last week when I talked to the support staff group, when you picked the comparables, how did you pick them? And how did we stack up in those comparables? And so I pulled some data together. The source is the U.S. Census Quick Facts. These are income figures for the most recent period calculated, which would have been, I think, through about 2012. And there are two different groups that we used for comparison purposes. The first one, and these have been discussed with the board as well. The first was we called the Teacher Administrator Expanded Group, and it was expanded in that we first looked at a primary group of districts that were in the immediate vicinity and then expanded that to some other districts across the state that had similar student populations and not dissimilar demographics. And what you see from this is median household income from a high in Verona of $82,335. That's probably Epic, yeah, big firm in Verona. Again, in the Madison area, $61,007. D.C. Everest, $54,300. And our rank here in Stevens Point is here, certainly in the lower half, and the average without Stevens Point is $48,007. So we're sitting here about $10,000 in household income under the average of these communities. I was asked to give us analysis of support staff as well, so I did a little bit different comparison. I don't recall which one is in this group that isn't in this one. These organizations were selected by the cabinet. We went to them and said, you know, this is what we think you should at least take a look at. And again, in this group, we're sitting about the same in terms of household income. So the ability to pay, where is this relevant? The ability to pay it would seem to me, have some relevance to where we place ourselves in the market, and it certainly is a measure of fiscal capacity to pay. So, with a history of collective bargaining that we have relied upon for 40 years, 2 generations to set compensation, where are we today? And I want to spend a few minutes with this because it is unique in terms of what your obligation is as a district to both bargaining and non-bargaining. So just to bring us up to date, I think I have this right. I've checked it with folks who should know. We have a number of groups. We have a transportation group represented by the Teamsters, I believe. And those agreements expired in 2013-14, and bargaining is continuing with a certified unit. Custodial and maintenance, that last agreement expired in 2010. Wages have been frozen. The union has recertified, and bargaining is anticipated. I see a bunch of green shirts I'm familiar with in the audience. That's probably some of those folks are in that group, I'll bet. There's a support services group. Last agreement expired in 2011. That unit has not recertified. Pay was frozen effective to 2010, but the board has granted retroactive increases totaling 2% for the prior 2 years. Clerical also has not recertified. That agreement also expired in 2010, and like the former group, there were 2% increases granted retroactive for the 2 prior years. Educational assistants is a rather unique situation. They just recently certified. However, they also received the 2% retroactive, and I take it bargaining is anticipated. Food service has not recertified, and they too received the 2% retroactive. Administrators, and that whole group I just went through represents about 450 employees or so. Administrators is by far the smaller group, principals, central administrators, etc. They had an old meet and confer, I call it a meet and confer agreement. Looks like a collective bargaining agreement. I figured, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Looked like a contract to me. But that one expired in 2013, and that agreement was now replaced with individual agreement. Pay bands were adopted. It is the one group that has a pay plan. Pay plan bands were adopted under new individual employment agreements. Salaries are effective July 2013. Those contracts run through June 30th of 2015. There is provision in those agreements that pay can be adjusted based upon performance, but it's my understanding there's nothing currently under consideration, probably waiting for this report. And then the last group of the teachers, whose agreement expired in 2011, they continued under the salary matrix until June 30th of 2012, at which time the district abandoned that schedule. Pay had been frozen. There were new rates adopted for new hires in hard-to-fill jobs. The bargaining unit has recertified, and bargaining continues to this date without a contract. So, in my world, that's a pretty complicated deal. A lot of different relationships, a lot of different policies, not a tremendous amount of consistency between those policies. There are some common threads. But what's the relationship then of bargaining to this study? Because I think that's really important. Bargaining under Wisconsin Act 10, and I understand that any day we could see a decision out of the Wisconsin Supreme Court as to whether or not that law will stand or not. But bargaining under the new law is limited to the cost of living, as determined by the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission in a periodic review of the changes in the Consumer Price Index. Any pay systems established by a board is outside of bargaining and not limited by bargaining. Strange law. Basically, what that means is you can negotiate, you can decide whether or not to agree to a cost of living increase because the duty to bargain does not have a requirement to agree. And you can then do whatever you think is in the interest of the district outside of that bargain without any implications for that bargain whatsoever. And the limitation on decision-making then is your financial capacity and its sustainability. So you could negotiate a cost of living increase of 2% and agree to a pay plan that costs you another 3 or 4. You just have to be able to pay for it if you think it's a good idea. Or you could adopt a pay plan and not agree to a cost of living increase. It all depends upon, ultimately, where the board wants to end up and what your obligation is through bargaining and what bargaining produces. It just gets more complicated, doesn't it? So let's talk a little bit about these individual pay plans and their basic features. The support staff pay plan, which we reported out some preliminary findings in October, and what the board asked us to do is to bring it all forward at the same time. So we took a step back, went to work on the teachers and administrators, and are now back with a pay plan recommendation for that staff. Covers over 400 non-exempt staff who have no pay ranges, all single rates. It's about a $7.7 million payroll with an average wage rate in that group of about $15 an hour. In the study, we asked staff to document their job responsibilities, and we established internal relationships using a point factor job evaluation system, which I have described to you in some great detail before. And we measured salary markets. In order to recommend a pay structure, methods for pay progression in that structure, so you could actually get a raise and move through the structure, and then we will recommend supporting policies and a maintenance plan if we have agreement that is a good structure. In general, a pay plan is a good plan in our book if it balances measures of internal consistency with market competitiveness. Internal consistency under the current rate structure was established by bargaining through all these particular units. That doesn't mean it's equitable. A bargaining agreement is a political document. It is not an internally logical document. A good pay plan is consistent for everybody, and we find in talking to folks it needs to put more emphasis or even some emphasis on performance management. Internal consistency is established through job evaluation. There are 5 factors in our system: education and required training, decision making, problems that you solve and thinking challenges in your work, communications, and working conditions. We do the analysis. It's objective, it's experienced, and we studied a lot of jobs over a very long period of time. Doesn't mean we always get it right. So we always recommend there be an appeal process following adoption. In terms of market measurement, we don't try to measure every job, but we try to measure a set of benchmark jobs with likely matches that are fairly stable in content and represent the hierarchy of jobs within the organization. And we gathered data from the public sector, the private sector, and not-for-profit based upon our earlier conversation with the board as to what we should pay attention to. Yet there were 3 key policy issues. Issue number 1, so what's the market paying? What is that market? So we did a custom public sector survey. We used data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is excellent. And we used the Central Wisconsin SHRM survey, which is also a long-standing survey and excellent. Matched jobs to the data and ended up with a market sample that covers hundreds of area employees. Again, what issue does the district wish to take in the market? Again, based upon ability to pay, we're a little below average here. But the pay plan we're bringing to you recommends that we match the market in terms of average pay at the middle. These are the benchmarks we used. These are the market rates, both the public sector custom estimate and the supplementary estimate pulled from those other sources. And this is information we have presented to you in October. Policy question number 3. Now, of course, you as a board could decide we want to place ourselves higher in the market. You could decide based upon our ability to pay, we need to place ourselves lower in the market. We default generally to the notion that we ought to be average at least. We ought to match the market so we're competitive. But there is a major variant in this pay plan that gives employees in this group a substantial earning opportunity for the vast majority, not all. So we developed a pay plan, handed it out as part of your packet. The features of the pay plan is the control points, which are the midpoint of the grade, are created from market averages. There are 11 pay steps, not 1, per range. 11, not 1. Bargaining produced 1. This produces 11. Each step is 2.5% of the control point. You move to this control point in 1-year intervals under our recommendation, and you move to the maximum from the control point in 2-year intervals, which means you got a way to get from the minimum to the maximum. However, we suggest that movement from step to step should require a performance review that says the employee is at least meeting expectations. You don't have to be a superstar, but there has to be a performance review that says you're doing all right. In terms of implementation, our standard approach, and you may vary from it, is that if an employee is currently making less than the minimum of the new range, they should go to the minimum. If the current employee is currently making between the minimum and the maximum, they should go to the step that provides an increase. That particular feature is universally disliked. An employee will say, and with some passion, "What do you mean I'm going to step 2? I've been in this job 15 years. Why don't I get to go to the maximum?" And the answer is simple. You can't afford it. I don't think. And when we get into giving you some fiscal notes, you'll begin to see the implications of this if it's a pay plan you like. If your pay is greater than the maximum, we recommend your pay be frozen. However, I will tell you, we have any number of clients that continue to grant cost of living increases, not as a base salary adjustment, but as a bonus for the cost of living. You need to decide whether that's something you would like to do. But as I walked in tonight, I was asking the question, so what's the scuttlebutt about this pay plan? And somebody mentioned to me, and a member of this group came up to them today and said, you know, should I retire now I understand my pay is going to be cut 30%. Absolutely false unless you decide to do that. You will never, ever hear a recommendation out of any member of our firm that anybody's pay ever be cut as a result of a study we do. Ever. It's disastrous. The worst thing that should happen to you as a result of a study that we're engaged in is you walk out the door making the same money you were making when you walked in. This is an example of a pay range just so we could all look at one. These are the jobs that we allocated to grade G based upon about point evaluation scores. And this is a range. It goes from, here's the control point. The minimum is 87.5% of the control point, and you can earn up to 112.5% of the control point. Right now, every single one of those employees is in a single rate. No ranges. No progression, no movement, no advancement. By the way, I did a quick look. This pay plan, if implemented, according to my numbers, and we have to do some costing, I believe that 95% of this unit, of this group of employees and the support staff, and they're in a lot of different units, have an opportunity to make more money than they're making today. There are a few employees that are red circled, but they are by far in the minority. Now, we haven't suggested that those people who we've documented are substantially underpaid receive enormous increases all at once. Nor have we said take it away from the folks that we've documented are paid higher than the market. It's a leveling process that will happen over a longer period of time. And if you want me to, I'll give you a gender equity analysis on that data as well, showing outcomes. So what are the next steps to this pay plan? You need to have an internal review. You need to digest it. You need to have your listening session, hear what people have to say. We need to prepare a fiscal note on the recommendations. Now, I showed this to the administration the first time last week as well, before it hit your packets. They didn't see it before I finished it for your packets. First reaction was, what's this going to cost? So, well, I've got some estimates, but, I think we need to go through our listening sessions first. You're going to need to consider the implications of that fiscal note relative to your bargaining strategy. Then we suggest once you've done that, you consider this for board action. And then following board action, employees should have an opportunity to appeal. Because some of those employees in G probably think they ought to be an H, grade higher. I usually don't have anybody saying in G, I think I ought to be an F. It's just Katie and I were talking, Katie McCluskey's here with me tonight. It's strange that we handle appeals all the time. It's the strangest thing. In 40 years of doing this business, I've had 2 people tell me I rated their job too high. I'm always too low. It's amazing. But we will listen to appeals, we'll handle them objectively, and we don't have a problem recommending changes if we think something's in error. And jobs can change, too. Let's talk a little bit about the teacher pay plan. Back in December, we reported to you we had reviewed pay trends in K-12 districts. We called around to folks. We talked to neighboring districts. And probably the one thing you can say without any doubt whatsoever is folks have gone off in a whole lot of different directions. You give the people the authority, and they tend to exercise it. And they have. Some people haven't moved. Some people have moved dramatically. Some are sort of in the middle. And we measured and reported on markets. We conducted focus groups with the teachers we suggested them. We held a bunch of them, both for the board and for a group of teachers that were selected at random. We addressed hiring internal equity issues that we identified, and you directed us and directed the administration to correct, made recommendations on how to do that. And we worked with what I call an ad hoc advisory committee on compensation to develop recommendations for you to review. Under those focus groups, workload's increasing. This is what they told us were their concerns. Less focus on teaching, lack of trust and respect from the community, from the board, from administration, perceptions of internal pay inequity, which we've now stepped to resolve, lots of financial uncertainty. What's my future hold? I've got a frozen pay plan, no steps, no lanes. How do I get ahead? A diminished voice in the affairs of the district, and a lack of transparency. This financial uncertainty one was very significant. The teachers felt the district made a mistake when it abandoned the old pay plan before a new one was in place, because at least they could see where they might be able to go if the pay plan was resurrected. They're extremely worried, and this came through in the committee as well, that the district will adopt a pay-for-performance mentality and process before the district is ready to absorb it. And with all the changes in the past few years, what's next? Where do we get hit next? So what's happening elsewhere? Most districts have abandoned the traditional lane and step plans. A few have gone to pay for performance. Most of them have found some way of adopting a different leveling technique in terms of how you move people up. A couple of challenges in this work is that traditionally collective bargaining agreements limited the amount of salary you could pay somebody hired from the outside based upon their experience. There were very severe limitations on what you could do. And in the absence of collective bargaining and with districts now having the unilateral right to offer more, and all the pay plans that have been frozen and the competitiveness for particularly hard to fill teachers, those rules are gone, and it has resulted in internal inequity. And as we explained to you in December, that simply has to be corrected because it is so divisive within the organization, and to your credit, you did. Also, experienced teachers are retiring, leaving a demand for experienced teachers. There are critical areas of shortage, and pay is being bid up. So the district's response was to develop a rubric or a set of rules for hiring hard to fills, and then had to go back and correct the resulting issues. So what did our market analysis show? We identified a group of K-12 districts in conversation with you, a primary group and an expanded group. And basically what the data showed is the median market rates are very competitive with what you're paying in the district based upon the various cuts for level of experience, level of degree, etc. Very thorough analysis, DPI data. This data is reported to the Department of Public Instruction, and we obtained the entire database and analyzed it. So, with your approval, we established an ad hoc compensation study committee. These are the folks that were on it: teachers, assistant principals, etc., principals. And this group worked hard, Katie met with them, I met with them. A lot of kicking around of ideas, thoughts about what to do, and our recommendations to you tonight are our best thoughts on how to proceed. Doesn't mean we got it right, but it is a collaborative effort that I think this group supports. We suggest here in the report a 3-tier pay plan for teachers and related. And we coined some titles for the levels. One is called an initial educator. Those are new teachers. We asked the question in the focus groups, so at what point in your teaching career did the light sort of come on and you said, I think I can do this and I like it? And the consensus was it's somewhere around 5 years. So that's sort of what we modeled the initial educator levels at. And we're recommending to the board that you adopt level 1 for the coming school year. Excuse me, for the coming school year, 2014-15. The committee requested that they have an opportunity to spend some more time on levels 2 and 3. And that we focus on 2015-16 as an implementation date. Why? Well, both movement to level 2 and level 3 have a performance component. And they felt you're just not ready for prime time yet. Now, you have a simpler performance review system, but the perception is it may not be administered consistently, and in fact, it could be upgraded, maybe not go all the way to the effectiveness model, because that's going to take longer to put in place, And they would like to have semester 1 of next year to continue working on this to finish it off before the end of the term, so you can then consider it for implementation in the next year. And we support that. This is what level 1 looks like. There are initial salaries, $36,500. A master's degree is an additional $7,000. And an add-on for moderate, hard to fill. And it's our recommendation that be a 5% bonus and not added to base. Very hard to fill is a 10% bonus, but in both cases, the committee agreed there ought to be a minimum stay, or you ought to have to pay it back. If you come and get your bonus and you leave town, you ought to pay it back, at least part of it, and we have to work that out. Not uncommon in the world of human resources, where you have signing bonuses. Second level as an initial educator is an additional 3%, third level is 3.5%, and fourth level is 4%. Moving within the levels requires a recommendation by the employee supervisor that the employee is meeting performance expectations with a sign-off from 2 people in administration to make sure we're being internally consistent. And we would then need to look at existing staff who are between the 2nd and 4th years and figure out how this would be allocated to them so that we have internal equity maintained in the system. Now, the reason why this has got the support of the committee and us is we're very concerned that this is the group of teachers, when you hire them, you better keep them. You want to get them to the next level. You need to be able to tell them what their future is going to be when you hire them. Level 2 is what we call the accomplished professional educator. Again, it's that point where you say, yes, I am now a professional, and this is a promotion. It requires evaluation, recommendation, and on promotion, you get a 10% raise. Second level is 5%, third level is 3%, fourth is 2%. And then the maximum salary you can earn at this level due to length of service would be $49,105, and with performance-based pay thereafter to a maximum of $75,000. Now, obviously, this piece is not done yet. And existing qualified staff would be allocated to the accomplished professional educator level at their current salaries. Level 3 is called a certified master educator. And it would either be using the criteria in the place for the National Board Teaching Standard Certification or a portfolio-based approach to be designed internally that says, here's the book of work, here's a set of qualifications, this is what it means to be a certified master educator. With a 10% increase upon certification up to a maximum of $10,000. Future pay increase is determined by performance, obviously. Got a lot of work to do there. No range maximum. Of course, salaries are also covered by collective bargaining and any across-the-board increases negotiated between the association and the board. This is apart from that. So, a question asked by an experienced teacher within the group is, well, we understand what's in it for the younger teachers, for the beginning teachers. We understand that where we're headed with the accomplished professionals, we got a little work to do, but our problem is, within this district, almost 60% of the workforce is making more than $55,000 a year, and the question is, so what's in it for me? Well, you can negotiate a cost of living increase, and let's finish the system and open it up. Administrators. Again, these old meet and confer agreements expired. Everybody's covered by individual contracts now. An option for performance-based pay, established pay bands, and our conclusion is current salaries are competitive. In some cases, they're higher than the market. In some cases, they're lower, but the bands are realistic and should be maintained. You'll need to decide whether you intend to put any energy and pay for performance for 2014-15. The contracts provide for that option, but it is not a requirement on the district, but is a discussion item. And these are the current pay bands. Some of them are 12-month contracts. Many of them are 11-month contracts. So what are our findings and recommendations? Again, in general, base pay is competitive. And your benefit levels are competitive. You need a new pay plan, in our opinion, you need a pay plan, in our opinion, for support staff that's grounded on objective analysis and an opportunity for pay progression. We think we need a new pay plan for teachers. I think there's universal agreement on that point, that provides adequate compensation for early career teachers, meaningful objective levels of professional accomplishment, and future increases that are related to performance when the system is fully implemented. And that means implemented, tested, trained, fixed, broken, put back together. And then the pay bands and contractual relationships for administrators should be maintained. The action steps we're proposing to you is that you post these pay plans and the report, that you encourage staff to submit questions for response, either in writing or in person. You get our fiscal notes done, set a date for board action, and finish the teacher ad hoc committee work in semester 1 of 2014-15. Discussion. Questions? Be happy to answer anything I can. I'm finished. But I'll be happy to stay up and answer any questions you might have. Do you want me to stay up here to answer any questions you might have? Let me get my water.
And can we have, oh, hello. Charlie's going to stay up here to answer any questions we have. And one thing I wanted to tell the board we need to decide before we leave tonight is, do we want Charlie or a representative from Carlson Detman to be available at the listening session next Monday? I told him we would tell him before he left tonight. So, and do we want Charlie specifically, or do we want a representative from Carlson Detman? It would be you? Well, then never mind. We'll see you Monday. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? And, oh, sorry. What we're going to do is we're going to discuss the compensation of all pay groups except teachers right now. That way, Lisa will be able to recuse herself when we discuss that. So right now, if you have any questions that do not specifically have to do with teacher compensation or the teacher pay plan.
Questions is, when you put the data together and you had Stevens Point listed, did that include the Plover area, or is that just?
There were two pieces of data on the median household income.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little complicated because your district expends and so I used the city of Stevens Point as one data point, and then used Portage County as a second data point. I did not use a combined. The data didn't exist. I could put a data point up for Plover as well, if that would be helpful to you.
That might be helpful for when you present it.
Sure. Yeah, and I noted in the data that there is a major difference between the median household income in Stevens Point and Portage County as an entity. And I think that's what's going on.
That'd be helpful.
Happy to.
Lisa?
But also, it would have been helpful to have those medium household income information ahead of time, for the board to analyze. The cost of living in the different areas has also been a question of concern for staff. And the medium household income based on education levels instead of just using the compiled medium household income. If that information, these are just areas of concern from staff members, why that wasn't used.
Well, I guess the question would be, what would median household income by education mean?
Well, if
What would be the...
Go on
report?
the fact finder for
Yes.
the U.S. Census Bureau. If you go under education, then it has the medium household income based on your high school, associate's degree, bachelor's, and then graduate and professional. So I think what they're looking at is what are those differences, and in the comparison with also the home value, which would give them some idea of the cost of living.
Yeah, it's not uncommon. We'll use median household cost, home value cost as a measure. Most people would agree that's certainly a decent measure of differences in standard of living, cost of living.
Correct.
And so we certainly could pull that together as well.
Well, I'm relaying concerns that people have called me about. Also, the difference in the market groups, why the support staff had one market group versus the other groups, why we weren't consistent in the markets.
The group that was for support staff was selected in consultation, if I recall correctly, with the cabinet. And they said, here's a group we think would be a decent marker. We felt that in the support staff jobs, the question usually is, what is the labor market? Where are you hiring people from into these jobs and where you lose them to? And I think everybody pretty much acknowledges that by far the vast majority of employees that are hired into support staff positions are hired locally. Yet, and we could have used an only local marker for that as a market, but there was also concern of issues of equity of what these people were making in similar jobs in other school districts as well, even though they're not going to commute here from there.
And that was brought up too, the fact that a lot of the schools, their population was much lower, their student count than the district, that we're in. When you add Mosinee, you're talking 2,000, Shawano 2,300, Rhinelander 2,400. So there was concern about the justification in using those districts in the comparison.
Well, and I can tell you, that's the list that I had shown you back in October, and the issue, I don't recall the issue having been raised then. Of course, if you want to strike certain communities out of the list for comparability and take them out of the survey data, if you tell us that's what you want us to do, we'll reconstitute the survey based upon that.
Well, I think what they're looking for is a reason behind why you thought they were comparable.
And I don't have the reason on the tip of my tongue. I mean, I was in the group, in the case of the comparability group for the support staff, we asked the question of the cabinet, who would you consider to be comparable districts? That's the list we were provided. I'm not wedded to the list. If somebody feels strongly that taking somebody out or putting somebody in is worthwhile, and we certainly can do that, I just think we need to have a good rationale for why we're doing it.
Well,
and I understand,
and that's exactly what they're
and you want to
asking
have a rationale for why they were picked in the first place.
Exactly.
That's a fair question. I'll try to get you an answer. Fair enough.
Also then, in your report, you had stated, or it states that the administration being paid over the market value because of their experience. And yet we have staff members who have been with our district 30 plus years. So what experience are you referring to?
Well, I think
that's justified.
That's a good question. I think in my experience, and I don't know about yours, but one of the things that tends to drive administrator pay, because they tend to be promoted from out of the bargaining unit, is that if the bargaining unit pay is typically fairly high relative to the rest of the marketplace by numbers, then in order to encourage somebody to take the job, first of all, you're going to put them on a contract of a different term length than a normal school year, quite often. So there's an inducement to work more months. And there's also a question of, and what's a reasonable increase in pay to have separation? And so quite often, what administrators get paid historically has been driven by what the bargaining unit gets paid. You've got a very experienced bargaining unit. You've got very experienced administrators, and I think the two went hand in hand, and that's why pay tended to get probably a little higher in some cases than the market, but certainly not all. I mean, there are a number of cases here where you're paying less than the market is as well. The question is it within the bands? That's question number one. If it's not, does that mean that you're not entitled to an increase in the future if you're above the maximum? I mean, that's a policy question. And do you intend to implement pay for performance for administrators? We discussed pay for performance with you regarding support staff. You said, no, we don't think so, that's a good idea. So we brought you a step plan type of approach with a performance element to it. And as you can see, with the teaching workforce, we're still dealing with the issue of having a decent enough performance management system to feel comfortable moving to pay for performance. So I don't know where you want to go with the administrators because we haven't talked about it with you.
Right, but I'm trying to let you know the questions the staff are having. They want to know the rationale behind the thing, you know, why you didn't include certain areas, why you picked the small schools, the cost of living, the why experience counts in the administration. I'm not sure this district has ever linked pay to administrators to the bargaining groups that I don't know of any time that has happened. Maybe it's true, maybe it's not, I have no idea. But I think there needs to be something in there, and I don't see in the information where you have anything for experience. You have the flat rate based on whichever level they're in. Is the level linked to longevity? Is that what that's, you know, the 11 steps? Because there's concern.
I'm not sorry, I'm not following you.
Well, there's your pay for whatever area. You have your 80% or 85%, 87%, all the way up to 112%.
In a support staff pay plan, yes.
Correct.
Yes.
So what happens, I mean, the support staff is looking at or thinking they're going to get the same deal that the teaching staff got, where they are going to have new hires come in getting the same pay they're receiving or more. So how was that addressed?
I would be very surprised if this board would support that.
So then,
I would think you would be consistent with your direction involving teachers, which is that is not something you wish to endorse.
then my other question is, you made a recommendation that if people are below the minimum,
Right?
just to bring them up to the minimum,
Yes.
if you're at the minimum, then you get to the next level where you get a raise.
Right.
So why would it be okay if we've been underpaying people for years to only bring them up to that point?
I'm just being sensitive to your fiscal realities. If you told me you had a bushel of money you wanted to spend, I can certainly help you spend it.
And with all due respect, that I think is a board decision. I think we hired you to give us the data, and
Right.
that type, I think the board needs to decide. So,
Well, but
That
in
being
fairness, just tell me what it is ultimately you want to do in terms of how you want to treat these folks, and we'll figure out what it costs, and we'll tell you. If you tell us you want us to put people on steps that are commensurate with their length of service in that job, we can do that.
well, it's just that I don't think the rationale behind that recommendation is something that should be based on. I think that should be a board decision. I don't think that's something, but whatever.
And I agree with you, and that's why I said at the minimum you need to do this. If you wish to do more, we can certainly help you do that.
Any other questions? Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that's okay. Just a quick comment. I think I do have some questions, but one of the things I would really like to hear from is the listening session and hear what people, I mean, this is affecting people's lives and their salaries and their experience and what they believe is fair. So I think it's really important for us to hear those comments, those suggestions. Also, you know, when we're talking about these dollars and what we can afford, we're talking about the whole district. We're also not talking about salaries, benefits, you know, insurance and that kind of thing. So it has to be realistic, because I think it would be unfair to say, this looks great, and then all of a sudden we're adding that. But number one for me, I really want to listen to what people are talking about, and how it affects, how they think it fairly affects their work and their the time they've been here and the work they're doing and opportunities that they've had or haven't had. So I think that's really important.
Kim?
In your, I'm going to call it a speech, but I know what it was. Oh, I'm sure everybody can hear me. You mentioned that you've already talked to the support staff last week.
I met with a group of the support staff last week and had a conversation with them about this pay plan so that they were aware of it.
So they got it before the board got it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm a little concerned about that.
So did the teachers.
And the teachers were spoke to too?
Oh, yeah, this is a product of conversations with them.
Right,
Absolutely.
and I believe they need to be a part of it. I just wish it would have came to the board first. I mean, but that, and they'll have their talk, and I'm not quite sure who approved that, if the board approved it or not. My question, I'm going to go back to page 14 on the information that we received in our packet. And it is about expanded comparable groups. And I believe it's talking about our administration. It lists all of our administration, if I'm reading this correctly, and what we're paying our average annual pay to our admin, correct? Okay. And in the green line, that's the medium where admin gets paid in your study. Okay. However, we're paying all of our admin over 70, is that in the 75th percentile and more.
And not every employee in admin is listed. Those are the benchmarks. So, for example, when you say a principal, you have a lot of principals. When you say an assistant principal, you have a lot of assistant principals. So you'd have to look at a census sheet for what each one of them actually makes. And I didn't provide that to you. I can.
Right, and I did ask for that today too, and I just got to my packet. But you're using an average, and I understand that.
Yes.
So we're just going to say as the assistant principal, you have an average of 99.6. Medium is 83.1, and 75 percentile is 90. So at least the majority is making higher than what, way over the medium, way over the minimum, or medium, let me say it that way.
But in most cases, not inconsistent with the pay bands that this board adopted.
I agree. We
Now, you could reconsider those pay plans, bands, but that, you know, you did adopt a policy that says these are our bands for these jobs.
Well, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I'm just want to make sure I'm reading that chart
I think you're reading it
correctly.
accurately.
Okay. I may have questions, but I'm going to go through my packet if somebody else wants to move on. Jeff?
So, expanded comparable group for the administrators, what's the local comparative? What would be reflective of our bands?
We did not do an analysis of what the private sector is paying administrators or teachers.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't make myself clear.
All right.
With the administrators, if we just looked at local districts and what we pay them, so if you looked at Marathon, you looked at Wood.
The immediate surrounding area?
Correct.
We could do a data cut on that basis as well.
Is that inclusive of this expanded then?
Yes. It included the primary group plus the expanded group. So when we say expanded, it was a primary plus.
I want to be clear on this one. Besides wages, were job descriptions compared before concluding to use the listed districts within this wage study?
The way we do analysis is when we do survey analysis, we send out a list of thumbnail job descriptions of positions, And we ask, so we're talking about the support staff here, and we ask the districts, do you have people in this job? And if they say yes, then we send them a survey and say, fine, now tell us what you're paying that job. So it's a two-step process for us, okay?
Follow-up question with that, and concerns with custodian, there are different types. There's housekeeping, there's maintenance. Was that question addressed?
There is a distinction in our job evaluation between maintenance workers, custodians, and positions we sometimes call light housekeeping and cleaners, that type of job. And if I recall correctly, I'd have to go back and look, the matches here were against the maintenance jobs and the custodians, and then there were technical jobs higher up than that in terms of HVAC technician, et cetera. Yes.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, I have a question. Where would our security staff be in this? I didn't see anything specifically.
And I didn't report back to you on the security staff.
Okay.
And I can if you want the information. In transportation, I did not, because you have had a continuous bargaining relationship with the Teamsters. It seems to be working reasonably well, and those are unique jobs, and I'd be happy to give you comparative data as well if it would inform your bargaining.
Transportation you're talking about? Because, okay, I would appreciate it if you put security in here.
Happy to.
Thank you. The other question, I think people will ask these questions next week, so I don't want to ask them.
So.
Yeah, I don't want to ask them for them, but there were a few things about, for instance, levels of secretaries, what the secretaries do, the head secretary of something, that sort of thing. So to prepare you, I'm pretty sure those are the kinds of questions that will come out. A lead high school secretary compared to a lead elementary secretary, that sort of thing. If someone is doing a double duty on something, what do we do with that?
I want to, if I could, just a point of privilege, if I can, I appreciate the folks who were kind enough to print signs and bring them and so forth. The group of employees in this recommendation that we've talked about tonight, who are simply the greatest beneficiaries, are the folks identified here as the working poor. Period.
I beg to differ when all we want to do is the people that we pay less than the minimum, we're only bringing them up to the minimum.
It's just a question then of how much you want to help them.
Okay, sorry, we can't take any questions from the audience. You're going to have to save it for next week, just because it's not on the agenda. Okay.
And I'd be happy to answer it then.
Anyone else with any questions pertaining to this? Okay, Lisa, if you want to.
Yep. Amy, I'll recuse myself as teacher portion.
Okay. Ms. Totten is recusing herself. Does anyone have any questions in regards to the teacher pay or teacher pay presentation? Nope. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Trish.
When you made your presentation, and I'm trying to get back to that slide, when you made your presentation, you said there's a couple of places where there needs a lot of work yet.
Yes.
And I guess I'm wondering if you could expand on that. What is it that you think needs a lot of work? Where are you going with that?
There is a feeling on the part of the committee I worked with, and Katie and I agree with them, that you may be closer to a decent enough performance review instrument that you can use for level 2. The definitions in level 3 require more work than that instrument. And I pressed them to, well, let's adopt levels 1 and 2. But their feeling was that there was not enough internal confidence across the district in the ability of building principals or the acceptability on the part of staff to support and feel comfortable moving to level 2 today. But they felt that with a reasonable amount of work, some heavy lifting, but a reasonable amount of work, that should be very doable in semester 1. And they would appreciate, because we're up against the end of the school year, and they would appreciate having the time to be able to do that. Also understanding you're still bargaining. It's not as though there isn't an opportunity to sit down and work out some sort of a pay increase. Now, I'm not speaking for them. You can have your own conversation with them. And I'm sure they won't hesitate to have that conversation with you. But the concern is that absent some better definition of what it takes to get promoted from level 1 to level 2, and some understanding for particularly that mass of teachers that are in that 60% that are over 55 grand, sitting between 55,000 and 75,000, until they understand how they can earn more pay under a performance system or a elevation to level 3, it would be a tough sell internally. And they just wanted more time to work it out. And they're moving in the right direction. They've worked very hard at this, and we wanted to support them in that. And I'm prepared to work with you through the fall and work with that committee and do whatever I need to do to be a resource, and I'm not going to charge you another dollar for it. Because I want to see the work done.
Okay, Jeff?
So what is the logic that we start this new pay plan, only a portion of it, as opposed to waiting till it's all complete?
The logic is if we don't do something to make sure those beginning level teachers can get raises, you are at risk. And that's universally acknowledged by that group. There is not a hesitation for a second on that point.
And when you guys created this 3 tiers, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yes?
How did you look at the old plan, and then did you try to incorporate some of the old plan into this, or
No.
you just kind of scrapped it and said this is how we're going to run with it?
Scrapped it and said, let's start over.
What was the logic behind that?
Well, the board abandoned it. You folks sort of put that one to bed a long time ago. And so if it seemed like a good idea to you to put it to bed, why should we resurrect it? And there was really a feeling that we just needed to move on to a different system. It was time. So then the open question was, well, are we smart enough to figure out how to do that? If we work together, can we do it? And this product, this set of recommendations is a product of that collective effort. Now, I wouldn't begin for a minute to tell you that it would be universally accepted and loved by everybody. I will guarantee you there are all kinds of people that would love to go back to the old system. And there is absolutely no legal impediment whatsoever to you from re-implementing it. The one thing you can't do is bargain it, because you don't have enough money under that system to pay for it. There's not enough under the cost of living constraints under Wisconsin statutes. You can do it unilaterally, but you cannot negotiate it without counting it towards the cost of living increase, and there isn't enough money in the cost of living increase to pay for it. It's a strange law, but it is the law. So far. Does that make sense to you? Sense would be maybe the wrong term. Do you get it? Sense would be stretching it. Yes?
Jeff? No. Okay. Renee?
When I look at the plan, and having walked with you through this process, one of the things that you had indicated that would be done is reviewing what's been going on in other school districts and things. If maybe you can shed a little light for us on that. And then the other part is of the question, so what's being done in other places? And then the other part is the admission. I know in an earlier report of yours that there wasn't the trust, which I don't know if trust is the right word, but the training.
That's the right word.
For the administrators to evaluate and to, move teachers up the scale. And how would you address that?
We had a couple of things. I'd be happy to bring back those slides that we had in terms of talking to other districts and have those available for the listening sessions as well if you want, or I can distribute them to,
helpful, yeah.
because you've got some new members on the board and so forth. We can bring that back to you and get those out. I think this trust question is just not having enough experience doing it. I mean, it's quite a statement to say that in K-12 education, and this is not, I'm not talking about Stevens Point District, I'm talking about across the United States. We're having this debate about how do you evaluate the performance of people who are constantly evaluating the performance of people in their classroom. That's a tough one. So I don't think it's a question if we're going to do this. I think it's a question of when and how. But I think it's important to do it in a way that is as supported as possible. One of our recommendations to you in December is that you begin to use a reliable, valid engagement measurement piece on staff so you have a baseline between where people are now and where you take them in the future. Engagement matters. It's not satisfaction. It's commitment. I read one place, and I used to do engagement type of work and so forth back briefly in my days at Gallup. I studied it and so forth. I mean, it's right. It's absolutely right. And people have said you only have to answer one question when you measure engagement. Is this a place you'd recommend your brother or sister come to work? And if the answer to that is no, you have a problem. And it's important to know what that answer is, so as you start to implement policies, hopefully you're moving the needle. So my advice to you is that as you embark on this grand experiment in performance management, that you do some engagement measurement periodically all along the way, so that as you, as policymakers, know whether you're having a positive impact.
Earlier part of the question with what have you seen throughout the state in terms of what other districts?
All over the map. I mean, this is just craziness all over the place. People are coming up with performance-based pay, some bringing back the old lane and step systems or modifications thereof, simpler systems, straight pay for performance systems. I mean, some people are recommending we downsize, right-size, subcontract, there's so many variations in what people are doing in response to the pressures and challenges they're faced with. And as you know, the political environment in the state of Wisconsin is not uniform. Different locations see things a different way. I live in Madison. Madison is not like some other places in the state. Stevens Point has got to figure out its own way of doing this. That's why I'm so encouraged by this committee, this meeting. I mean, they buckled up and went to work. Serious, hard questions.
The only thing I'd like to is just a statement. I just hope that as the board walks through this and listens to the public, is that they will continue to have, do you work with that committee so that everyone that's taken the time on the teacher pay, because that's what we're talking about right now, that they do have an opportunity to walk with you through that. And with the evaluation process, I really do believe that when the board looks at that and sets policy, there really needs to be some accountability on the administrators' training and their level of ability to implement the evaluations, because I think that's going to be key in terms of building the trust and going forward.
Well, as Katie and our other clients would probably tell you, I don't make a lot of free offers. I'm really committed to what you're doing. I think what you're doing here is very, very important, and I want to see it succeed. And that may mean that I basically hold people's feet to the fire. Occasionally I'll have a decent idea or something I can be helpful. But I just think we need to keep moving and keep this thing going, because I think we can finish it.
Which district would you say, or districts, are the closest in comparison to this compensation system that's presented? Okay.
Never even came into the conversation. I don't think, Katie, the question was, what districts of those we looked at are the closest to what we recommend here? Heartland Lakes, yes.
And there are other ones that have many that have modeled that portfolio after that.
And members of the committee are coming in and saying, well, I've talked to a district that does it this way, and I've seen a district that does it that way. But, you know, this is free base. I mean, we're really doing something here that is pretty unique. And I like that, because if you create it, you'll own it. If I suggest it, it's not as good as something you figure out.
Does anyone else have questions? Kim?
When was the observation taken about that the staff, and I believe this is with the teachers, that the base salary is over 65,000 and almost 60% of 55,000? What year was that taken?
I think it was September of last year's DPI numbers, because we didn't have the current numbers. Does that sound right, Jenna? Yes.
I don't know if that
So,
needs to be
wait.
refreshed with all the retires and, you know, resignations to our district, if that, because, you know, of course, them are the ones that are leaving, that seem to get up there. So if we can just kind of relook at that, that would be
Yes.
great. Okay. On page 11, you have that the BA, BS teachers' salary, starting salary is $36,500. Do you know where the other districts are starting at? Do you have a list of what other districts are starting at?
Off the top of my head, I think, yes, we do.
And so we can get that, the board can get that?
Yes.
Okay.
But here's the problem. What's the posted starting rate and what are people actually paying? Because the posted starting rate may not be what they're paying.
That is true.
Because of the competitive, and folks are being competitive. Oh, you've got 3 years experience and you teach science? We can do a little better than that. So you just, you know, when you ask people, so what's your published minimum? What are you actually paying? Different answer. That's why that DPI data, I think, is a better marker, because it shows exactly by defined standards, because people have to report it by law, it shows you exactly what it is.
Okay, if we can get that to the study that we're
Well,
comparing.
it won't be, yes, but it won't be available until we get back into a September reporting period. But if we're working through the fall, you'll have it.
Okay. And just to make sure I understand this, if you're looking at a level 2, so you are looking at then, if they only have their BA or BS, you're looking at 36.5 plus a 3%, and that's what they would make.
No, they've advanced through steps up to the accomplished professional. There are percentage kickers on top of that.
Say that again?
There are percentage increases by year increments on top of the starting base. So you then get promoted off of that number when you move up to the accomplished professional.
Okay, yeah, this was before the accomplished. This was, okay.
And we can give you some examples.
That would be great for me.
Happy to do that?
That would be great, yes. And this is for the board, I don't know if it's for you, but we need to get a list, a full list of the moderate, hard, and very hard to fill positions. So we can kind of look at them, what are we looking at? Because I don't think you would have that list, would you?
I think we presented it to you when we gave you the equity award adjustments when you approved them, but we'll go back and look.
Okay. Would it be in your October or December?
No, it would have been when the board took action to grant the equity awards to bring people up to internally to deal with the hard to fills. I believe in there was a report as well as to said these are the hard to fills and this is where it happened, but we certainly can get you that information.
That would be great. I got it on the new matrix, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a full list. Let me say it that way.
Yeah.
That would be great for us to know. And I think my last question is on the certified master's educators. Do we have any of those at our district right now?
You know, Katie, Are there any? I don't think so. I don't think there are any. It's an application process. I don't think we're aware if there are any. But we also don't know how many would be qualified if they were to apply. I mean, that's the interesting question.
And my question then to the administration, I think this one would be is, do we have an avenue, once we establish this, do we have an avenue that allows the teachers to get to this point, and what is it?
Right.
So, I mean, that would be...
And that is obviously one of the things that we have under conversation with the committee is to exactly how would that process work so it's fair and equitable.
And we don't have an answer to that as we stand?
We do not.
Okay, thank you.
You have an idea, you have a concept, you have support for the concept coming out of the committee, and a willingness to work it out and bring you a very firm set of proposals so you know exactly how it would work.
Other questions concerning teachers? I have a couple. First of all, is the committee meeting anymore this year? Are you done meeting?
I don't think there is another meeting scheduled now.
My question is does the committee have a recommendation for what, you recommend what to do with the Tier 1 people? Do you have a recommendation for what to do with like the Tier 2, Tier 3 people in the fall?
Here's where we are. I said, listen, it's my responsibility, our responsibility as your consultant to make a recommendation to the board. I'm not going to put the committee on the hook for that. Okay? We do need to protect their impartiality, and, there's a political process we need to honor here as well. So we took the responsibility. I said to them, I want you to understand you would prefer to not move forward on levels 2 and 3 now. We will support that, and we intend to recommend moving forward on level 1. Nobody jumped up and shouted. We didn't ask for a vote. I think there's consensus. But I don't want to speak for them. They can show up and write you, or you can talk with them, do whatever you think is appropriate. But I think that was supportive. Originally, on the hard to fills, those bonuses were hard numbers. They were base salary adjustments, and we all agreed we'd probably be better off with bonuses, and so I made that change to the recommendation so they were bonuses instead of base adjustments, because then you've got the equity issue, and I think that's a good solution. So I'll own the recommendations as being ours, but they were not developed in a vacuum.
Then just one more quick check if anyone has any other questions. Okay. Yes. Is everybody done with teacher questions? Okay, come on back.
Two things. Can we have the bus driver comparison done, the transportation?
Yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes?
And the other thing is you had brought up something about most people don't travel more than 50 miles in radius. So then staff wants to know, why are we using comparisons from outside of that 50-mile radius?
That's a very good question. Because I've learned through experience, had we not included them, we would have been criticized for not having included them. You as a group can decide whether or not you want them included or not. We've given you the data. If you now tell us you wish to shape that data down to a 50-mile radius, we can do that.
Provide it in both formats?
Yes.
That would be very much appreciated.
Yes. Not by listening session, but yes, we can do that. By the time before board action, we can do that. Depending, because I think my suspicion is, you're going to tell me, but my suspicion is you're going to go through the listening session and then you're going to decide at what pace you want to move.
And I would assume there will be more questions.
I bet there will.
Is that it, Lisa?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And Charlie, thank you. Katie, thank you. Jenna, thank you. And on behalf of the board, and even personally to the whole committee, thank you so much for the work that you've put into this. Thank you for your recommendations. Thank you for your thoughtfulness. I'm very grateful for the time you've invested. This is not an easy task, nor a popular one, and I'm just very grateful for the work that you've put in. So to reiterate, the listening session is next Monday. Do we say 6:30? Amy, 6:30 at Ben Franklin. What I would like to ask the board... oh, sorry, it's Memorial Day next weekend, so June 2nd. Don't come on Memorial Day. You'll be very lonely. What I would like to know from the board, in general, what are your thoughts on the listening sessions? Do you want people to submit questions in writing? I would guess that would be good for complicated questions so that we can get them to them earlier. Do we want people to have a time limit? Do we want people to sign up? How do we want to handle this? I think we've scheduled it for a 2-hour chunk. Do we want Charlie to only answer questions? Do we want to be able to answer questions? Overall, can you give me your thoughts on how we want this handled, or do you want Jeff and I to make those decisions?
We had a rough estimate of how many individuals wanted to speak. That would help us allot the time if it was only 2 hours.
I think they could do both. If they have a question they know it's going to be a little bit more advanced, maybe they can email it to someone, to you. If they don't feel that that's going to be appropriate, then I would say have a microphone where they come up to the podium and ask the question. Do we want to, we basically want questions. I would say maybe not speeches, but questions or maybe comments. So, I hate to limit somebody because we can sit up here and talk all night long, and I guess I've been accused of doing that before, and they have the right to do it too. They'll be laughing at me because, it's their job and it's their community also. So I don't know if I'd like the limit, but. Speak in your mic, Chris, please.
I would think if people have comments or an extensive question with, specific detail on that, would be great to have an email on that. But if they just have 1 or 2, questions, I think it's fine. And again, it depends on how many people show up in that, start out with, if there's 100 people, what do you do? I don't know, a few minutes.
You make the meeting longer.
I guess if I had some questions, a few minutes, because you're going to have to add the minutes to the answer and to the explanation of the answer also. So maybe, I guess I would trust Angel and Jeff to kind of look at it. If we have any suggestions, we can throw it to them. And
How about if we do this? If we get questions emailed, and don't email them to me or Jeff, email them to adailey, D-A-I-L-E-Y, at pointschools.net. If you email those to her, we can post what they are, maybe a couple days in advance so people know that those questions are being asked and addressed. Then you don't have to repeat them. If you have a variation on that, we're not going to provide the answer until the listening session, but at least you'll know that question's already been asked, and that would be helpful. So I can't give you a date because I don't know, but we'll get them posted somewhere on a website so that you can see them, what questions have already been submitted. Of course, and then we'll forward them on to Charlie. So again, send them to Amy, which is adailey, D-A-I-L-E-Y, at pointschools.net. Renee?
Angel, maybe when you post Charlie's presentation, you can put a note there, questions can be forwarded, just in case people didn't get it written down as you were sharing it this evening.
Yep. It's on the district page? Oh, it's on Amy's email is on the top of the board agenda. So if you didn't get that, that's where you can find it, and the board agenda is online. Any other questions or comments before we move into the organizational portion of this meeting? Okay, thank you very much. Good night. We'll see you June 2nd. Okay. Then what we're going to do is hopefully quickly, she says with anticipation, through just kind of in general. So what we're doing is talking about selection of dates, times, and place of regular board meetings and committee meetings if we choose to go through with committees. So let's start there. The two things that were put on the table that I remember, and I think I have my notes with me, 1, 3 different committees instead of 4. So the committees were human resources kind of mixed with student achievement curriculum, policy, and finance. Is that correct? Were those the three hybrids, or were they mixed up differently? Yep.
They might have been mixed up differently. Usually human resources didn't have a lot, nor did policy, but curriculum was usually, curriculum and student, it's called student achievement. That one usually was a pretty full meeting. And then your finance or your business services is a full meeting. And then the other one, the policy and legislative, that usually wasn't as large. And your HR was, I don't know if you need that.
That's what we're talking about. Does anybody have thoughts on that? Yes.
Chris, can you please?
I'm getting closer. I think we definitely need a student achievement committee. We definitely need a business services. I'm not sure about, I'm not thinking we need the HR. Those usually come for specific information. And the policy and legislative, we do have a legislative liaison. I think if that would be covered by the board, so that would really, if we needed to add it onto a committee, we could. But those two, I think, would be the main committees that I would like to see. And I did make a suggestion. I don't know if this is the appropriate time. I think we should find out. I would recommend, if we're going to have those committees, that we also have one board meeting. And if we need an additional board meeting, we can always add one. But I think with those two committees, it might work well with one board meeting a month. But I think because the administration has to prepare a lot of that information, I think that would depend on when we wanted and when the board wanted to have the committee meetings. You know, the second week, the third week. Do we want them one in 1 week, one in the other? I would recommend that we have them in the same week, maybe a Tuesday and Thursday, to give enough time for preparation for the information to come to the board meeting. So that was a suggestion.
Other thoughts? Yep, Lisa?
I think we need to remember why we went away from committees. We went away from committees because as a board, we did not trust the information that was transferred from the committees to the board. And if we don't change the structures of the committees and we go back to what we had, we're just going back to what didn't work. Now, if we start televising those committees, if we start doing something, but the way with this board and this administration, it doesn't work with the old committee structure. So I'm not in support of going back to it. I'm not in support of going back to one board meeting. Well, actually, I'm not sure we ever were there. I, myself, would prefer that we do the 4 board meetings a month, do them every Monday. If we want to do them, structure them differently so that 2 of the board meetings are run like committee meetings, that's fine, but I think they need to be televised. I think the public needs to see them, and we're held accountable so that information isn't changed from the time it goes to from committees to the full board. It doesn't work with this administration.
Okay, so that the other suggestion is to meet every Monday, even if one of the Mondays looks like committees, and have them all televised. Okay. Yes, you may.
Comment, and it's actually A1, but I thought I'd throw this in there since we're talking about board and committees. We had talked about rotating the school locations. There is a lot that goes with that. I actually had an email, just kind of a question to Angel and a thought. What if we have so much to include, including the taping and getting administration to all the schools and that. So I thought, if we're going to go to committees, what about if we had our committee meetings at the schools? That's where a lot of the discussion happens, and I think people would be glad to have us there, and board members usually show up anyway, so at least if you had your committee meeting there, it would be a lot easier, both, I think, board and administratively, to get the committees there, and we wouldn't have to worry about bringing all kinds of information, all kinds of, administrators there, and I think that would be a great way for people to get more information, by listening to the discussion at the committees. It hasn't been done before, but I think we could try it. I think it would be a great idea to have some of the schools see how we get to where we do when we get to the board meeting. So it was just an idea. Jeff?
I would recommend 3 committees. HR policy, I think those two go kind of hand in hand. Business services, and then curriculum. The thing is, I respectfully disagree with Ms. Totten that committees, when run effectively, are a good tool for us to be efficient in the things that we do. When it comes down to it, that committee chairperson, whoever that is, needs to grow big shoulders and take the responsibility for the work that's done within that committee and make those recommendations to this board. And when they step in front of this board of 9, the work product has to be ready for us to make that decision. And if it's not, then it needs to go back to the committee and they do that work. The other thing is, I like the fact that we have the committees on one day. I personally would like it on a Monday. That's the best day that works for me. But also limit those committees to 1 hour. Not 1 hour and 10 minutes, not, you have 1 hour. And if there's more work that needs to be done, then they can always call another committee meeting if necessary that particular month. They can always do that. That's an option. But we should really limit the amount of time so that we don't have the problems that we had in the past of where the first one ran over and then the second one ran, and then the third one is always kind of the redheaded stepchild. It stinks to be on that last committee because you got pushed to the wee hours. So that's my recommendation to this board. I just think that with anything in life, you just got to work at it and make it work and have the commitment that we want this to work, because I'll tell you, midnight, 1 o'clock meetings, those have got to be a thing in the past. And the only way that we're going to get there is if we actually make our committees do the work.
To 4 meetings a month. That's the other way to stop it from being midnight, 1 o'clock.
Right, that's the other recommendation on the table. Have 4 board meetings a month. We would just need to probably discuss what each of those looks like, because we don't need 4 regular board meetings every month, nor does anyone need to have agenda setting that extensive that many times a month. Yes, Mr. Ebel.
I would be in favor of the committees. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for discussion that we don't necessarily have at our regular board meetings, nor should we have. And I think a committee is the appropriate organizational structure to carry out that conversation.
Chris? Yeah, and just to kind of tell on what Jeff said, I think both of us have seen really good committees and seen the work really come forward in the right way. I'm not going to support four Mondays in a row. I just don't think that's productive. I think, and I have no problem with having the combo. I just think strategically, though, I'm not sure how we should, what days or, and it depends on what time. If we say we're going to do it at 6:30, are we going to have one committee meeting or 2 that night? And I think we should set that time limit. I'm not sure if an hour, I'd almost like to go an hour and a half, but then if you have 2 on that night, that's 3. So maybe an hour and 15 minutes and just say that's it. 90 minutes or not 90, good adding, 75 minutes or something like that to give a little leeway, because some of the discussions, especially with curriculum or student achievement, are really important. So I would support that, though, 3. And again, if we're going to, I think 1 board meeting, if we do our work the way we should on committees, I really think, and we can try it and see how it works, and we can always change it if it doesn't, but I think we should start with the committees, and I still think we should have a little, I don't know what it takes to prepare all the things that we're going to ask for those meetings, so I think we should have a little bit of leeway with administration, find out how, if we do have the second Monday of the month, the board meeting, what do they need, when do they need those committee meetings to get the information we need to bring to the board? So, that's it.
Yes, Trish?
I ask two questions. First of all, can you kind of recap where we're at with the discussion? And second of all, is there any formal motion?
There's no formal motion, which we don't need if we reach a consensus. I just asked that. And where we are right now, we have two completely separate ideas. One is for 3 committees. The 3 committees would be a Student Achievement Curriculum Committee, a Business Services or Finance Committee, and a Policy Legislative Committee that would include Human Resources. The other idea is to meet every Monday as a board, and even if some of those Mondays look like committee meetings, that we gather as a board and do it, not separate into smaller committees, but all do it together. I would just add, if anyone would entertain the thought of a meeting a month and a, not what we're having tonight, a workshop, like some sort of workshop. We have a list of workshops that people have asked to have, different kinds of information to give out. I think the benefit of that would be that we'd be limited to the 6:30 to 8:30, so once a month we'd always know we're only meeting for that 2 hours. I don't have the list in front of me, but I know Terry and I were both keeping a list of kind of what people had asked to do in a workshop. So maybe a meeting and a workshop a month. It would not require preparation necessarily. Just another thought.
If I can just add, I would really be in favor of, no offense, not having 4 meetings a month. I think that 4 meetings is very formal, and I don't think that, I think that the committee structure gets more public involvement because they're a little bit less formal, and I love the idea of moving the committees out to each of the schools. They're easier to move around than the formal board meetings. As we heard from our last meeting, we're not able to move our formal board meetings because of the technology constraints and the fact that we live stream everything. But the committee meetings, being a little less formal and a little bit more open to, sort of brainstorming and sort of idea generating like that, we can move those around more easily. We can go to the schools, which I quite frankly think we need to be doing. I think that the board used to do that. I think that that was a wonderful thing that they did. I was able to experience that as a parent, and I just think that that's good for the schools, that's good for us, and that's really good for the community. So I would be in favor of doing, continuing, maybe with regards to our formal board meetings, 1 board meeting, 1 workshop, and then our various committee meetings throughout the month. That's probably going to end up being 5 different meetings, but I don't think that we're all going to serve on all of the committees. So, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it also is not quite as draining on each of our individual time constraints, or requirements, I guess is a better word.
Okay. Any more thoughts?
Yes.
Kim?
I would like to see the meetings still being on Mondays. There's some of us or some people on the board that may work evenings and to get off or have other things that are going on. I mean, we all have families one place or another, but for some of us that may work evenings, then we can just say Mondays we always have to have off. We did it before, and we did four nights. We did committee, we did meeting, we did committee, we did meeting. I would be game for that. The committees, I would love to see taped. I can see the benefit of going around to the schools, but I do want them taped. So then, and I used to go to all the committees. I used to be sitting there regardless if I was sitting at the table or sitting in the audience, so then I could learn firsthand, and if it changed from the time it came to the board, I could ask why. And I think that's where the problem lied, is you would sit in the committee, it would be one thing, and then it would come to the board, it would completely change. And again, I don't know if it was the committee chair or just the information that has came around from one to another. But I still think we need 4. We could always drop one. We can always say, hey, let's try this for 6 months. Let's revisit it. And, and then we could always drop a board meeting. But I would like to see them on Monday for everybody, so we can just pick one day and, Monday's a hard enough day to go through, I know that, but that would be my suggestion if the board is going to go back to committees.
Chris?
Just one quick comment, Kim, one of the reasons that we don't tape and we didn't tape committees is exactly what Trish said. They're less formal, and we have community members on there. If you want people to really be open, they're really a little intimidated by knowing that they're being taped when they're giving their opinions and that's been for years, that we haven't done that. They are less formal. They're not on TV. Nobody's taping every word they say, and I understand why you're requesting that, because then you actually have, the information. But if you're going to, we haven't decided, but if we're going to include some of the community or the kids, that may really hinder what they tell you. It's supposed to be a little more relaxed where you can have that discussion, and yet it's not so formal that every single word you say is going to be taped. So I don't have a problem not taping them.
Well, and I'm just going to respond to that. I mean, I do agree. I mean, but anybody knowing if they're going to be joining the committee, this is what's going to happen. And I don't think, I'm hoping, just as we sit up here every time we say something here at this table or out in public, it's in the paper. Yes, are they going to be a little intimidated? You betcha. But they're going to know that coming in. It's going to be taped. If we live stream it or if we tape it, it's more for the benefit of everybody. I'm like, okay, what was actually said there? And I think, and I do believe that we should get staff, we should get students, and we need to get community members, their input a little bit more. But I would surely love us to see if we can get that, some kind of taping more than, I mean, they're all audio taped. They were audio taped and, and there's notes taken, so.
We don't have a consensus, but Dan, do you mind if I ask, what's the reality of taping if we went to committees? If we go to committees, is it a realistic thing to have everything taped or live streamed? Okay. That answers my question, I think. Yep. Oh, go ahead.
Can someone please explain to me how if we change from the old structure, and I acknowledge it's not working now, we should not be staying up as late as we are, but going back to a structure that didn't work and why we left, what are we going to be doing different to make it work this time?
I would suggest that we have a very different mix of people and a group of people that 7 of 9 lived through what didn't work last year and have no desire to be up that late again. I don't necessarily know that it would work. I think both of these ideas are actually very viable and very good ideas. We're gonna have to decide on one and try it.
Well, and I agree, but somebody who's on the opposite side of me, if somebody could tell me what we're going to be doing different. I mean, in theory, I totally understand how committees are supposed to work and how it's supposed to be, but it didn't work for us. So what's going to be different?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Trish and I have sat actually on the same committees for the county. Some things that we can do differently that for just the sake of time, case in point, policy. I mean, doing the wordsmithing and kind of beating out the policy to what, that we truly want as a vision for our district, that is perfect for a committee because the whole board doesn't need to be a part of it. By the time that it gets to the board, I don't want to say it's a done deal, but it should pretty much look like a finished product that the board has to spend relatively little time on. Another one would be an example of curriculum, and this is where we can use technology, and I'm kind of get sidetracked here a little. Why can't we just do a YouTube video of our committee meetings, and then you just post them, as opposed to doing the live streaming or anything like that? We have that capability on our iPads that we can record. My kids do it all the time. I'm sure they can show me. But we can utilize that in conjunction with, case in point, curriculum. They may have a large program that they want to present in committee, but by the time that it comes to the board, it should be a 5-minute presentation a very short synopsis. And then as board members, if that's available on YouTube, we can look at the committee. I mean, I think it's a great idea that you want to tape them, and it's a tool that we can use in our toolbox. And as a board member, before it gets to the full committee, we can go out and watch that whole YouTube if we wanted to. Or you trust the work that your fellow board members have brought forward to you and the other members of that committee and the work product that they bring to you. But when it comes to the full board, it's not to reinvent the wheel. Again, not saying that it's a done deal, but it should be in a position that the board says, yeah, I think we're there. This is a good thing. If it's not, then it needs to go back to the committee and they need to do the work that they need to do. So that would be the difference, is that the committee chair really needs to step up and be an additional leader on this board whenever they're having those committees, and have that constant communication to where they have an end product for the board.
So how do you ensure that that happens? Go ahead, Chris.
I don't think
Sorry.
you can ensure it, Lisa, but I think one of the things, putting a time limit on it, having a structure to the committee, and, the chair of a committee can really get the work done with the committee, but without a structure. A lot of the committee meetings had board members in the audience with community members talking back and forth to the board members who were on the committee and the committee. And I mean, we were spending all kinds of time. Committee meetings were being an hour and a half, 2 hours, and that from those discussions and that. I mean, when you come in there, you have a job to do. That's your work to do. Do you want input? Yes. But you realize that the work needs to be done. And this board, I think, has been through enough tough times that I think we're really willing to work together and move for, getting the work done, doing what we're doing. And I really think it's worth a try to do that.
Yes.
I guess I want to just respond to what's different now. And what's different now is that we got different people on the board. Jeff and I have come from some pretty extensive committee meetings and can I just say, I really dislike this long line. I feel like I'm cutting him out, and I apologize.
And you're not, because I'm far enough over because the lights are bothering me, but thank you.
But the committee meetings at the county level are such a good example. You come in, we've got, there's a very set agenda. It's dictated by open meetings law. You don't get to speak if you're not on topic, and, you have to follow the agenda just like we do here. But there's a little bit more informalness and informality, and I think it also gives the opportunity for more public to come in. But I think the bottom line is it comes down to trust, and we have to trust that whoever is chairing that committee does a good job. And when we come back to the full board, you ask a lot of pointed questions, and if the chair can't answer those questions, and if it's clear they haven't done their homework and fleshed it out, then it goes back. I mean, that's what happens at the county. Is I've seen, I'm pretty good about going to every county meeting, and I've seen Phil Eidsvog send stuff back a bunch of times if it's not thoroughly fleshed out. So I think that so much work can be done at committees. I think that it will give us the opportunity to get out into the schools, and it will bring more community members in and a greater diversity of opinions in a little bit less formal structure. So I think that the bottom line is it comes down to trust. Do you trust the people that you're working with? And this board has changed.
Kim?
And Trish, what you said, and I don't like this format either, because I can't hear them way at that end. I apologize. The trust issue wasn't really a factor. It is, in a way, because we did flush things out, and I think that was the concept. Things would go to the committees. We would bring it to the board. We would have more questions. It would have to go back and forth, and people got beat up about it. However, the YouTube thing, or somewhere where I can watch it, because I learned by listening. Maybe I don't have to ask 3 or 4 questions, because it's already been asked. And if I bring it up, it would be just more to tell the public, okay, we've already thought about this. And that's how I learn, and that's how I come prepared for my meetings. And to save me going in, I probably will still go into every meeting. And going to the schools, I like that. We did it before. I did it when I first ran for the board. We went to the PTOs. Would be great, but I do want to see if we do go to the committees, again, Mondays, every Monday, and go committee, board, and we can always maybe leave one of the committee meetings, the board meetings as an optional. Once we get this up and running and we get it going, we can, say this is going to be our optional one, and so then we're still not having our long meetings. That's what I would like to see.
Okay, so I'm just going to recap. We're moving on a hybrid here. So potential committees, yes, but still keeping them on Monday nights. The one thing I have to add, since Amy has told me she cannot do something every Monday night, so our board secretary is not available every Monday night. We would have to decide what to do about that if we were going to meet every Monday night.
I'm not available the third Monday of each month as well.
Oh,
Sorry.
I also want to remind the board, since we had committees last, we have changed our policy, and we have not yet had a chance to move forward with it, and that is that the board itself decides who the heads of each committee are. It's not something that I and Jeff would decide. It's something that the board would nominate somebody and decide on them, and they would be the head of that committee, and then after that, people would express their interest in the committee. So you would know what you were working on and who you'd be working with as your head. And Amy did say we do have a right to, the way it's posted, to decide that tonight if we decide to go to committees. A consensus has to be unanimous, and so if we're not a consensus, what we need to do is come up with a motion. So we need yep, go ahead.
Before you get there, though, let's keep one thing in mind. If we want to rotate schools, our schools are not open in the summer, and I'm not going to pay extra money to have somebody. Usually in the summertime, we had that bliss, just because we're not going to have somebody go open up a school so we can walk around. Okay, just throw that out there.
I think that's a good idea anyway, because we can get our committees set up for these states so that when school starts, we'll be raring to go.
What does anybody else have? Trish expressed she has a conflict on the third Monday of the month. Does anyone else have a consistent conflict on a Monday?
So let me just kind of ask a question.
Sure.
So what if we had committees on one night, though, and we limited it to an hour and we started at 5:30?
All three?
You need to speak into the mic. We can't hear you on this end when you're
Oh,
turning
I'm
that
sorry.
way.
Thought I was. So what if we had all the committees on one night, and it started at 5:30, so 5:30, 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, they're done.
Clarify, so you're saying all three committees would meet simultaneously?
Not simultaneously. You'd have one that starts at 5:30, one starts at 6:30, one starts at 7:30.
And they would all be in the same location?
Same location.
So if somebody wanted to sit in all three of them, they could?
It's there.
So a month might look like this. The first Monday is our regular meeting. The second Monday is our three committee meetings. The third Monday we'd skip because Trish can't come. The fourth meeting.
Okay,
and then, and then the fourth Monday would be our regular school board meeting again.
The first Monday would be our committees. The second, we always had the second and the fourth.
Okay.
First Monday would be the committees.
Okay.
Second and the fourth Monday would be like we normally have.
So either, could we do that second be board and fourth be board or possible workshop?
Sure.
If we don't need a board?
Right, well, I mean, we can always cancel a meeting. We can decide at the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, if we set that as our regular, we can always, it's easier to cancel it as
I'm
opposed
just
to.
concerned about the hour. I just would feel more comfortable with an hour and 50 minutes, just because if you're going to have people giving comments, I can tell you that's going to take time. And you still have, you have that hour. But you would definitely limit to that. I mean, then you're definitely out by 9, between 8:30 and 9.
Right.
So I would just recommend a little bit longer.
So Chris is recommending a 75-minute meeting. And Jeff said 3 in a row. That would be the first Monday of the month. The second Monday of the month would be the regular board meeting. The committee meetings would be YouTubed at various locations, the schools. The point being that the school can then highlight themselves, can be the hosts. We can tour the school. People can show us what they want to show us. And if it's represented, if all 3 committees are there on one night, then every board member would be available at some point during the evening. Third, so the second would be a regular board meeting. Third would be nothing. Fourth would be either another regular scheduled board meeting or a workshop, and we could determine that at the on the second Monday, what we need.
I do have a question. If on that, since we're doing all the heavy work on that Monday, that first Monday, the following Monday is the board, do we have enough time to get any and everything, how about, could we flip those?
Yeah, the second one be the board/workout, and then you're saying the fourth be?
Say the first be the board, the second be the committees, and anything that comes from those committees would come to the next board meeting? I don't know.
And we have 2 board meetings back to back.
Okay, so how
That would be
about,
in the first
Yeah,
and the
you
fourth
would.
and the first and the fourth and the
Would,
first.
yeah, you would have it back to back.
We'll need a motion because I'm not going to support committees because I understand it's an issue of trust. I actually agree 100% with you on that. But it's not that I didn't trust the board members, it's that I don't trust our superintendent. So it's that simple.
okay, so what we need is a motion, and that was the only thing we were trying to sort through is if we had the board meeting. Yeah, you can ask anything you want.
Administration, if we're having those, wouldn't it be, they work with all the administrators, the work that comes from those committees, when do they need that to get to for the board meeting? Because they have to compile all that information.
Oh, hi, Attila. What are your thoughts on that?
I would respectfully ask if you can consider the number of nights that administrators are out. Number 2 is it makes more common sense to have a committee meeting a week before a board meeting. We have it on Mondays, as Jeff proposes. That does give us Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe part of Thursday to gather other information. Otherwise, I would propose that you would suggest that you have committee meetings on a Monday and have the board meeting at which those committees' recommendations are considered be the second Monday after that. So you could have committee meetings on the second Monday and then the board meeting to consider those on the fourth Monday because Christian kids can't be available the Thursday.
Okay, so did everybody understand that? Let me recap it. So if committee meetings were on the first Monday, the recommendations of those committees would come on the fourth Monday. The second board meeting would be dealing with whatever other issues we have, but not those committees, not the things that those
Second
committees bring
readings.
forward. Or a workshop, exactly. Does everybody understand? Does anybody have any questions of clarification? Sorry.
Hi. No, that's what I was going to say. We're not saying that anything that we discuss at the committee meetings on the first Monday has to come back to that second meeting. There's nothing in our guidelines. We can say, okay, just like he suggested, and that's what I was going to say, but that's fine. I don't think we're going to get all the committees done in 3 hours. I've been there on them committees. I don't want us to limit ourselves on our discussion. I don't want our community members and staff to be limited. I would suggest, again, throwing that third Monday in there is possibly doing it on a committee that Trish wouldn't be on, and she would have the chance to YouTube it and catch up if she wants. Because we all didn't come to the committee meetings before. We all didn't. So I just think the 3 committee meetings on one Monday is going to be, and again then, all of our administration has to be there because we're going to be bouncing with all of them, where maybe one doesn't have to be there until that third meeting. Again, And we don't have to discuss it the next time. We can kind of rotate it like that. So that would be my suggestion, but
Okay, go.
I move that, oh yeah, thank you. I move that we have the first Monday to be our committees, to be 75 minutes. The 3 committees would be HR policy, business services, and curriculum. I don't care which order. I guess you can draw it from a hat. The second Monday would be a board meeting / workshop, depending on what the board's pleasure is. And then the fourth Monday would be a board meeting.
I will second that.
We have, oh, yes, Attila, sorry.
There are occasions where you're going to need to meet sooner than 3 weeks after you're committed, particularly with some issues in finance. I would throw it out there that either you're going to should have either a week for the regular board meeting, the week after committee meetings, or at the latest 2 weeks after. There are 2 times during the school year, which I know that there are financial situations that need to be handled, as well as, for example, notices in the spring regarding personnel. If you're going to have committees, I don't think you should wait 3 weeks to have a regular board meeting in which you address committee meeting items. They should be 1 or 2 weeks later.
On those, we can do
So
it.
switch week 1 and 2.
On those months, what we can do is just guarantee that we have the second board meeting on the second Monday. I mean, well, it would actually be the first board meeting on the second Monday. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay.
Second board, the second Monday can be either
A
workshop
board meeting or a
board
workshop.
meeting.
So those 2 particular times of year, we're going to have to have a board meeting with an agenda so that we can approve those items.
We don't have to do add the school, when the school year starts, to move them to schools, do we?
No, I think we can just agree on that. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Renee?
I'm not going to vote on this because I'm not going to be a part of it. However, I would just suggest that perhaps when you look at your committees, the policy and HR committee, I think the HR things just my suggestion would be that the HR things come to the whole board, and perhaps the policy committee, if you had a subgroup of board members that were willing to meet, they could meet at some other night. I don't think having community members, I didn't always see that worked particularly well. And then if you just had 2 committee meetings on a night, it would give you enough time. I don't think getting 3 committee meetings just for an hour apiece is going to provide you with what you would like to do, but that's just me, just from what I've seen.
You want to stick with your original motion? Okay. Does anybody have anything else to say, or we're going to do a roll call vote on it? Jeff, do you have any?
Could you recap on what's going to be each week?
Yes, I will. The first Monday of the month would be committee meetings. 3 committees, 75 minutes each. The 3 committees are Curriculum Student Achievement, Finance Business Services, Policy Legislation, Human Resources. That was a slash. Did I say that right, Amy? Oh, sorry. Please say what Jeff said.
And you can add in all honesty, I can modify mine and add you added legislation to the.
Jeff had HR policy, business services, curriculum, student achievement.
Is that all right? Like that? Okay. So those are the 3 committees. We'll do that the first Monday of the month. The second Monday of the month will be a optional board meeting / workshop night. Twice a year. It's an absolute necessity to have it because we need to approve personnel issues and finance issues that cannot wait 3 weeks. So we know those twice a year that we don't have a choice on that. The third, we will all eat dinner with our families. The fourth will be a regularly scheduled agendaed board meeting, non-optional. If there is a fifth Monday, we will eat at home with our families.
Vacation.
Exactly, we get a vacation.
And I would just add, policy and legislative with the HR, I have a feeling, I could be wrong, will probably be the least lengthy one, so we might want to put that one on the end, so that if it isn't that long, we're out of there even earlier. Just a suggestion.
Okay. Any other questions or suggestions? Okay, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Kokanowski. Yes. Mr. Presley.
Yes.
Ms. Scott.
Yes.
Ms. Shibley.
I'm going to abstain.
Ms. Sherrick.
No.
Otten.
No.
Baker.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Ms. Paxson.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-2 with 1 abstain.
Okay. The next question is, we have the right to elect committee heads right now. Do we want to take care of that, or we'd like to put it on our regularly scheduled June 9th board meeting?
I would suggest it do it on June 9th.
Okay, I'm going with head. I'm getting lots of head nodding. Okay, June 9th it is. Yep, it's 9 o'clock already.
Can we also then do our committee structure of like what we would want for community and staff and students at that time also?
We can, although I'm pretty sure it's already defined by policy. We decided last year when we wrote the policy what is required, so
Maybe
we
then
can
you-
just go over it.
Bring the policy then.
Absolutely. Right now, we do need to do an appointment of a board member to the Technology Steering Committee. And Amy, could you let us know who expressed interest in that?
I'm not going to do that because I'm going to make a recommendation for myself and a request.
Okay. Technology Steering Committee, do we have a board member who's interested?
I let Amy know too. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so
Both let Amy know, so.
Trish and Lisa, both let Amy know, okay? Anyone else? What do we want to do with this? Do
Can
we
we
want
have
to?
two?
That's what I don't know.
I'd like to make a motion then to
I was just going to say, now, are we going to, just for clarification, you're on the Consolidated Task Force and the other one? The one you're asking for, technology also?
Oh, yes. I'm asking to be on this one too. Also, yes.
well, the consolidated should end hopefully in mid-June. Technically, I thought the end of this month, so that one hopefully should be done shortly. So,
Okay. Does anyone have, I think we can do this by consensus, does anyone have an objection to Trish and Lisa being on the Technology Steering Committee? They are ex officio, non-voting members, but they are participating members.
I think it would be nice to have other board members, have a board member who isn't on one unless we don't have enough. I think it would be nice unless no one else wants to do it.
I think we have people asking to be on other committees. If I remember, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, I don't think anybody is asking to do it, so it's not that we're going to have a quorum there. If I need to make a motion, I'll make the motion to let them both be on the, do you want me to do it that way?
Oh, no, I'm okay.
Nope,
If everybody's
she's
okay.
good.
Gonna do
So
consensus?
do we have a consensus? Yes, excellent. So Lisa and Trish, thank you for volunteering. Amy will forward that information to Brian. Okay, we are now on to appointment of board member to HR Leadership Advisory Council. Okay, Chris would like to make a comment.
Since there are three board members on that committee, what I would like to do is remove myself from that committee.
That committee being the Consolidated Task Force?
Task Force, and previously, when they had the HR Advisory Committee, and I served on that for a year, and I really found that I learned a lot of information. I also worked with Keith, who was the new HR person. We do have a new HR person coming in, and I would really like to continue that, so I'd like to get off the Consolidated, since there are two of you on there, and be appointed to the HR Advisory.
Anyone else have any thoughts, questions, objections?
Also interested in being on the HR leadership, reason being, same as what Chris stated, opportunity to learn
Okay, so we have Alex and Chris, HR leadership. Again, just reminding you, these are non-voting ex officio members. They're there to listen and participate, but they don't have a vote. Anyone else have any thoughts? Okay, is there, oh, Kim?
Yep. Well, I had sent an email to Amy regarding that I would be interested in it too, so.
Okay, and do you want to stay on that? So we should go to a vote, because I don't think we just, well, who cares what I think?
Is there anything against having three on there? I mean, again, just like Chris said, it's very interesting to learn more about it, and I would be interested in learning on it. And if you just go and come and sit as a visitor, you can't really participate. You can listen, but you can't participate. So,
This is my concern with 3 members, only my opinion. I think because all of these issues end up in front of the board anyway, are we overtaking a committee that's not ours by having 3 voices that belong to the board, when all of that information then would come to the HR committee anyway, and then the board itself? So is it too much? Like, would people feel like, my voice doesn't matter as much as a board member's voice? That would be my concern.
And actually, being on committees, you tend to have that when there's too many administrators, but I've yet to see that with board members, because board members tend to encourage people to give their input because that's who they report to. So I think the more the merrier.
Yeah, Chris.
I would respectfully disagree, because I did hear some comments about that. However, one of the things that occurred is that when 3 of us were there, I think, Alex, you came into the audience, 1 more board member, we have a quorum in the room. Okay? I think it's great to come and listen, but I don't think you have to be a non-voting part of the committee. So that's just my
We
opinion.
were all recommended to come and attend that.
I know. I think that's great. I never even thought about it, but if 1 more board member had come, we would have had a quorum of the board at their meeting. So then you
Chris,
have to-
actually, we had checked about that, and we were told by Attila that they were posted in case.
Oh,
that
okay.
happened. So
Yeah, but-
there's nothing to worry
Right,
about.
but you know, the quorum
And
of
the
the board.
committees are posted also. So
I just think that the task force or those committees are meant for the people who are there, and I think when you start putting too many board members on there, regardless of whether you think it has an impact, I believe it does. So it's just my opinion. I don't think you need more than 2 board members. 1, I think, is fine. 2, I think, is fine, but more than that, I would disagree. So
Sorry, Kim, your hand was up first.
yeah, when I went to the Consolidated Task Force and I asked them about it, because I know that was one of Chris' concerns, I asked 3 different tables there if they felt the board was taking over, because now we have 3 people. They said really no. We just discuss. I don't push anybody, and I don't think anybody, I'm going to say for you too, Chris, I don't think we push. We just listen. We give our 2 cents basically about the background, and especially what we've been talking about is we don't. And if anybody feels differently, please let me know tomorrow, the little bit I'm going to be there, or email me. But, so, I mean, I can walk away from this board, not the board, sorry. No, don't print that, please. I can walk away from the steering committee for that one, and I'll just come when it's posted, so.
Yep. Jeff?
How many members are on the HR Leadership Advisory Council?
Attila, do you know the answer to that? How many members are on the HR Advisory Council?
Pat, do you know?
I think it was about 20. I think it was about 20.
So to have 3.
Okay. I'm just trying to write quickly where people are at on committees. If you don't mind, I'm just going to, so we can reiterate. Jeff, you're a legislative liaison, which is, are you serving currently on any committees? Okay, all right. Are you, did we elect you to be our CISA man? Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so let me put that down. Okay. Alex, you're our Boston School Forest rep?
Correct.
Okay, and you're asking to be on the HR? Okay. Chris, you're asking to be on HR and come off of Consolidated Task Force. I can't be on anything. Jeff, you probably... Probably with me, yeah. Lisa, Consolidated Task Force Technology. Yes?
Consolidated Task Force is short-term, like Kim said, that's just.
Right. Trish. Technology Steering Committee. Okay, and Kim, I have you
Clerk, if you want to put that down.
Consolidated Task Force and Technology Steering Committee, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the question before us is the HR committee. Alex, Chris, and Kim are asking, so we're getting nods. Trish?
How many times does this committee meet a year?
Pat, how often does the committee meet? You're on it, I assume.
It's quarterly and they're done for the summer, so they won't meet again until the fall, is what I heard from Jenna Bidwell.
Which by then, the Consolidated Task Force hopefully will be completed.
Here is my thought, and see, this is obviously a board decision. How about if we go with the 3, but ask our new Human Resources Director if she's comfortable with 3 board members serving on that committee, or if that sounds overwhelming?
No, I think it's a board decision.
Okay, then I think we'll have to go to a vote on this one.
I'd like to make a motion that Kim, Chris, and Alex are all on the HR Leadership Advisory Council.
Any further discussion?
Just one little comment. And Kim, I absolutely think you're right. You did not do anything to intimidate anyone or overtalk anyone, and you did ask questions. But I really honestly think that if you ask people, does it bother you, and you're a board member, there's no way if it did, they're going to tell you. That's just my opinion. We're board members, and they're not going to tell us that. So,
Well, unfortunately, I think they would. I mean, but again.
just a comment.
Why would they tell you that? I don't know. I'm not going to comment. Let's just go for
Yep,
the vote.
fair enough.
Let's
And
vote.
I think,
Jeff has a question.
Let's vote.
Ebel, yes.
Yes. I understand it is a board decision, but I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking the new HR person if they have a problem with that, and I think that we should respect that.
Okay, so we have a vote before us. Would you please read the motion, Amy?
The motion is to appoint Chris Scott, Alex Kokanowski, and Kim Sherrick to the HR Leadership Advisory Council.
Okay, as ex officio participating but non-voting members. Okay, let's do a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Ms. Shibley? Yes. Ms. Sherrick?
Yes.
Cotton?
Yes.
Baker?
Yes.
Yes?
Ms. Jackson?
Yes?
Mr. Kokanowski?
Yes.
Mr. Presley?
Yes.
Oh, we had a consensus, sorry. Okay.
9-0.
Yes.
I do want to say something. I mean, if we are going to, unfortunately, Renee will be stepping down, and we will be appointing somebody. If they want to be on one of the committees, I think we should maybe, make sure that they know that they're available.
Okay. That sounds good. Oh, my goodness, I think we're done with everything we said we'd do. Yes, letter D has been moved to the June 9th meeting. So, yep, go ahead.
I know it's not on the agenda, but this is Renee's last night. I want to personally thank her for the years of service to this district. You will be truly missed, and sad to see you go, but excited because this is a new page in your life. I hope that you enjoyed the time with your family and friends, and we're going to miss you.
Thank you.
Great.
And I would agree with Chris.
Very wholeheartedly, and I'm very grateful for your experience. Okay, I will, let's just go over the meeting dates so that anybody watching or listening to the recording knows. So June 2nd is a listening session at Ben Franklin. The public is allowed to submit any questions to Amy Daly ahead if it's more complex. question. Otherwise, you can just ask it. So that's adaily@pointschools.net. June 9th is our first regular June board meeting. June 23rd is our second regular June board meeting. I would entertain a motion to go into closed session. Oh, I'm sorry, I need to read it. I will remember this at some point. 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction, specifically the superintendent, specifically transportation employees, and specifically human resources.
Can I ask a question before someone makes a motion?
Yes?
Oh, I apologize. When did we decide when we're going to start the committees? Was it going to be July or August?
That we until we appoint heads, we can't
Okay.
really do much.
Okay, thank you. We'll decide next meeting.
Someone to move into closed session?
So moved.
Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Shively?
Yes.
Ms. Sherrick?
No, I would prefer to do this in open session, but no, it can be done in closed session.
Cotton?
I would prefer to do this in open session, but no, it can be in closed session, no.
Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Ebel?
Yes?
Baxon?
Yes.
Mr. Kokonowski?
Yes.
Mr. Presley?
Yes.
Ms. Scott?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-2. We are in closed session.